Hello, and welcome to Meet the Candidates, a forum for those running for Anoka County Attorney in the November 8th election. This candidate forum is being co-sponsored by the Anoka, Blaine, Coon Rapids Area League of Women Voters and by Mediation and Restorative Services, and is being recorded by NorthMetro TV as a public service to voters. My name is Leslie Waterhouse, and I'm a member of the Anoka, Blaine, Coon Rapids Area League of Women Voters. I live in Sherburne County and cannot vote for either of these candidates. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political parties or candidates. The League encourages informed and active participation in government. We advocate for important issues and help citizens become informed voters. We welcome all who are interested in learning about a variety of issues to join our organization. Just go to LWVABCMN.org to learn more about the League. This Meet the Candidate Forum is about informing voters. It's held to provide voters an opportunity to hear from candidates on important issues and compare their ideas. The views expressed in each of the forums are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. The League posts complete, unedited recordings of forums. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan political purposes. To begin the forum, candidates will answer 2 introductory questions they received in advance, followed by questions that were submitted by the public via our website. And then we'll end with closing statements. Answers are limited to 90 seconds for the 2 introductory questions, and then 1 minute for each of the other questions and closing statements. At this time, I would like to introduce the candidates for Anoka County Attorney, Brad Johnson and Wade Kish. Welcome, and thank you both for participating in this forum. So we will begin the question and answer portion in alphabetical order, and then rotate with each candidate being the first to answer. For closing statements, we'll begin in reverse alphabetical order. So starting with candidate Johnson, what is your motivation to run for this office, and what experience or knowledge will help you serve effectively?
Well, thank you to the League, and thank you to everyone in Anoka County who's taken an interest in the Anoka County Attorney's race. It's kind of a down-the-ballot race, so I appreciate everybody who's paying attention to it. My name is Brad Johnson. I'm running for County Attorney here in Anoka County, and I'm running because I love Anoka County. I'm an Anoka County native. Having been a city council member for 8 years in Coon Rapids, I'm concerned about the state of public safety in the county and good government. I'm concerned about the ability of the county attorney's office to get the job done. I think the office is a bit adrift, without a vision. And with the incumbent Tony Palumbo having finally admitted this summer that the office was at a crisis point, I think that's a problem. The chair of the county board has said the office is on fire, and they had to approve mid-year pay increases simply to keep people from leaving. We need to do better in Anoka County, and Anoka County needs to lead and not follow in the metro area. I grew up on 3rd Avenue in Anoka, went to Lincoln Elementary, and I'm a 1988 graduate of Anoka Senior High. I returned to Minnesota to go to law school and went to William Mitchell College of Law after attending Montana State University on a presidential scholarship. I've practiced law for over 24 years, first at 2 national law firms, and then I married Daisy, my wife, in 2003. She's a sergeant in the Minnesota Air National Guard, and we have 2 children at St. Stephen's in Anoka, and we're a military family. We live in Coon Rapids, and I was hired by the Anoka County Attorney's Office in 2007, first in the Complex Crimes Unit, then in adult prosecution, where I handled all sorts of felony cases, including murders and sexual assaults, and now I've transitioned into the Child Protection Division. I've done virtually every job that there is in the County Attorney's Office, and I'm currently serving in the Anoka County Joint Law Enforcement Council. Thank you.
And candidate Kish?
Thank you again. Thanks to you for having us. I'm running for 2 reasons. The first is public service. I've been very blessed to have many teachers, coaches, professional mentors who gave so much time and energy to me. I feel a very, very deep obligation to pay it forward. I heard recently someone comment that the goal of any professional career should be to put more back in than what you took out. And that's why every single day of my career has been spent in public service. The second reason I'm running is now more than ever, Anoka County needs a career prosecutor as county attorney. A recent poll showed that 81% of Minnesotans say crime is a very serious concern. The county needs someone with decades of prosecution experience to keep violent crime at bay. Someone who has handled over 4,000 violent crime cases and has supervised the prosecution of 15,000 additional felonies. That someone is me. The experience and knowledge that will serve me effectively and what sets me apart is 23 plus years of extensive prosecution experience, 19 years of which has been spent right here serving all of Anoka County. I've been building relationships every day of those 19 years and can hit the ground running on day one. Finally, leadership experience. I have 7 years of management experience, which is vital since the Anoka County Attorney's Office is the largest law office in the county. I alone have the leadership and management skills and experience to guide the 110 full-time employees in the County Attorney's Office in their essential work. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question, we'll start with you, candidate Kish. What are your goals for the future of Anoka County?
My goal for the future of Anoka County is simply to make people's lives better. That starts with public safety. People want to be safe and they want to feel safe. I've talked with so many people over the last year, whether at the fair, at public events, or as I've been knocking on doors, and over, the number one thing people say is they don't want us to end up like Hennepin County. We haven't let that happen. I won't let that happen. When you really look at the media exposés that have been done about the so-called failures of the criminal justice system, you'll notice Anoka County is rarely, if ever, mentioned because we're already doing the things the right way and holding people accountable. My goal is to continue on that path. Another goal related to public safety is mental illness. It's becoming a significant issue in all counties, not just Anoka. I'll continue to work with our partners on recently organized efforts to establish a mental health court in Anoka County, in addition to our drug and veterans courts. We'll also continue the already ongoing conversations we're already having with legislators to help our Protective Services Unit with the tools they need to obtain services for the mentally ill. There has to be another option for the mentally ill other than jail or the street. Finally, we will do more in terms of the rise of human trafficking. It is happening. I don't think the future of our county should include the ability to buy and sell human beings within our borders. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Johnson?
My goals for Anoka County are to really increase and improve the talent in the Anoka County Attorney's Office. Recruiting and retention of talent in that office is important because the Anoka County Attorney's Office is the largest law firm in Anoka County. Remember, the county attorney is two equally important functions: chief prosecutor for all felony and juvenile crime, top legal advisor to the county board and all the county departments. I mentioned that the county attorney that sits in the county now and who has endorsed my opponent has mentioned that the office was at a crisis point. Those are his words, not mine. 12 staff had left the office within the past year to higher paying jobs. That's 10% of the total office. That should never happen, and it didn't happen overnight. It happened through years of neglect and mismanagement, and my opponent is part of that management. I've committed to members of that office that every year there will be a market analysis done as part of the annual budget process. If justified by the evidence, I'll make that request to the board. And if not, I'll share that evidence with the public and with the office. But those additional priorities that include prosecution priorities include Mr. Kish has put in place policies in the office that ignore and decriminalize certain drug offenses. That's an invitation for more crime. If you ignore the small stuff, you'll deal with the big stuff later. We need to improve the strained relationships between law enforcement and the county attorney's office. And that's why, in a huge development in this race last month, the Anoka County Sheriff's Patrol Deputies Union Local 222 endorsed me over my opponent, even though he is the chief of the criminal division.
Thank you. And now questions that came from the public via our website, and each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to the questions. This one starts with you, candidate Johnson. What would you do to make residents of Anoka County more aware of what the county attorney does and how to access those services?
I think that's a really important and interesting question because I don't think many of the people in the community really know what the county attorney does. And part of what I've done tonight is explain that there are those two main functions of the office. But part of what we need to do is get out and build relationships in the community. And I have those relationships in the community and have been forging those relationships for 8 years on the Coon Rapids City Council. And that's why I've been engaged in the Joint Law Enforcement Council. That's why I'm involved in the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. That's why I've been serving on the Fire Protection Council in the county. Those relationships and getting out there are important. The county attorney can have a booth at the fair, and that's fine, and it's a good place for the county attorney's office to interface with with the people in the county. But the reality is the county attorney needs to get around and be seen and have a vision for the county and then share that vision. And one of the things that I'm going to do that's different is I'm going to create a citizens advisory committee for the county attorney's office to interface better with the citizens of Anoka County.
Thank you. And candidate Kish?
As I understand, the question was, what would you do to make residents more aware of what the county attorney does
Correct. And how to access those services.
and how to access the services? I think we do a fairly good job of this as it is. Yes, it's true that a lot of the citizens, and I've learned this as I've been knocking on doors, don't really understand fully what the county attorney does, but once you sit down and talk them through with that, they understand. Obviously, felony prosecution is something that everyone's aware of, and they just need to be filled in a little bit more of the information. In terms of how to access those services, there are a number of things that we do, and I think we do them well, and I would increase those efforts. And those would be newsletters on a monthly or a quarterly basis to the population to let them know what it is we've done in that month, what it is we've done in that quarter, so that they are aware of those things. In addition, those newsletters could include, and we've got a long series of brochures in our office that we can distribute related to the services that we provide. Whether that's to crime victims or to child support enforcement issues or to child protection issues or any of those things. So just a broader message of what we're already delivering.
Thank you. And this next question will start with you, candidate Kish. What will you consider when setting bail amounts? What alternatives to bail will you consider for economically disadvantaged clients?
Well, as we know, there are two purposes to bail. The first is to reassure appearance in court, and the second is to ensure the public safety. So those are the two massive things that we consider in addressing bail. As it relates to those two things, in terms of reappearance in court, we look at somebody's warrant history, how many times they've failed to appear in court before, and those sorts of things. And in terms of public safety risk, we're going to look at not only the offense they've just committed or have been alleged to commit, but their criminal record. I'm not in favor of any bail modifications just related simply to someone's socioeconomic status. I think we have to look at somebody's criminal record, their warrant status, the severity of the crime they've committed, and set an appropriate bail. And I think we've done a good job of getting very high bail on some very significant offenders.
Thank you. And candidate Johnson?
I would respectfully disagree. I think the Anoka County Attorney's Office has a problem with catch and release bail. Public safety needs to be a bigger emphasis in bail arguments, and Mr. Kish should no longer be sending inexperienced law clerks down to the courthouse or courtroom to handle bail arguments in victim and repeat offender cases. Many people are released without bail or adequate conditions in Anoka County, and I'm the one who hears about it as a city council member when somebody returns to a drug house, even though they're already out there on bail on another offense. There are some things that we can do to deal with the impact of that on certain people, and one of them is to do what we have talked about doing in Hennepin County, which is a release contract. That is a contract where the offender makes a promise to the judge and the judge makes a promise to the offender, so that it's not just an order, it's an agreement between the court and the party to come back. The other thing we can do is open up a night court so people don't have to spend a weekend in jail unnecessarily.
Thank you. And the next question, we'll start with you, candidate Johnson. What procedures will you put in place to ensure that racial or other types of bias do not impact the treatment and outcome of offenders committing similar crimes?
What procedures would we put in place to deal with the impact? Well, it starts, frankly, with talent. So it starts with having good, experienced lawyers and prosecutors who understand that bias and inequities in the criminal justice system should not play any part in a criminal prosecution. But we also need to have an office that better reflects the community. And frankly, as Anoka County, and I see this in my own city of Coon Rapids, has grown more and more diverse, the county attorney's office has not. And so I would emphasize bringing in and broadening the different temperaments, talents, backgrounds, and experiences of different people in the hiring process in the Anoka County Attorney's Office. I think that awareness and that institutional knowledge and diversity within the office is a strength, and it helps us deal with the diversity inequities in our criminal justice system. We would also communicate better with our other criminal justice partners, including the courts, the public defender's office, and our probation staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Kish.
I think there are a number of things that we're doing that we would continue to do, and a number of new developments we could institute to ensure that bias isn't taken into account. The first one is our office has had a long-standing committee, and I've been part of that. It's called the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, to increase exactly what Mr. Johnson talked about in terms of the diversity of our staff. That is an issue, and we've been trying to pursue it. The reality, though, is that we can't control the number of people and who applies, so we're left to try to select those candidates. So it becomes more of a recruitment issue, and we're actively working on that. The other component to that is, you're talking about consistency and ensure bias doesn't come into effect. We have a number of different review levels on felony cases to ensure it doesn't take place. The first one is supervisory review. Both myself and the assistant chief review plea offers that happen in cases involving prison commits. And then finally, we have a meeting once a week, once every 2 weeks, where bigger cases, prison commit cases, are presented to the county attorney, and these kinds of issues are weighed and debated with law enforcement present to decide what to do on those cases and to do it in a manner that doesn't take bias into account.
Thank you. And this next question begins with you, candidate Kish. What can the county attorney do to protect the senior citizens of Anoka County from the various scams aimed at them? Do you see anything new that could be done about this, or any current program that could be improved?
Well, I think our office, more than any office in the entire state and perhaps the nation, is well versed on elder abuse issues. Tony Palumbo took the lead on this 12 years ago and was the spearhead for elder abuse initiatives throughout the state, creating a number of different, even applications you can use on your phone to know what to look for in terms of elder abuse. So we are at the forefront of those things. The key to preventing these types of scams that you're talking about and the preying on elders is awareness. People have to know, not only the elders themselves, but their friends and family members have to know what these scams look like and what's involved in them, so that they can appropriately warn their loved ones that these are happening. The other thing that we have to do is create a culture, and I think is there to, if someone believes they're being scammed or that their loved one is being scammed, they have the resources to be able to reach out and find out what the answer to that is. And we've been providing those resources as a forefront leader in the state for 12 years.
Thank you. And candidate Johnson?
So for many years in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, I was in the complex crimes unit where we handled vulnerable adult cases. Those included financial exploitations of vulnerable adults, or the scams that you hear about. The reality is that it's a big ask of any county attorney's office to get out there and communicate with the community on all of this stuff. What I see out there is not the county attorney out there talking about these issues. I see him on TV occasionally, on cable access. Don't see Mr. Kish out there. What I see is law enforcement out there communicating with and holding seminars with the elderly and going out to actual senior homes and things like that. Frankly, the county attorney's office needs to come out of that ivory tower a little bit and get out into the community a little bit more. And I would emphasize that. That's why part of my Criminal Justice 2030 plan, which is on my website, bradforanoka.com, emphasizes building and strengthening relationships with law enforcement partners so that we can partner with them on these things.
Thank you. And starting with candidate Johnson, what steps would you take to build trust in the criminal justice system, ensure fairness, and that all parties feel listened to and heard?
So I'm going to digress a little bit here to talk about being a prosecutor, because I think it's an important thing to model being a good prosecutor to the line prosecutors that are in your office. It is important for me when prosecutors go down and resolve cases, and I have to mentor many of them, that they go down into a plea negotiation or they go down to a pretrial hearing and they ask the defense attorney and the defendant to tell them something about themselves, tell them something about the crime that happened that they didn't already know. You learn more about the people then that you're dealing with. We process people through our criminal justice system, not paper. And too often I hear about caseloads as if they're paper, and it's really people. So I want a person-centered focus on criminal justice. I also want a reentry court to deal with special situations, much like our Veterans Court, where we have people that are good candidates for reentry to get additional services and to get additional attention from a probation officer.
Thank you. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Please, so
Yes.
I can answer it.
What steps would you take to build trust in the criminal justice system, ensure fairness, and that all parties feel listened to and heard?
There are a number of steps that we can take. The first one concerns law enforcement, our relationships with them. We already have a policy where if someone is going to decline a case or not issue charges, first they have to have a conversation with law enforcement about that to make sure we're not missing anything. Secondly, as I stated, law enforcement is invited to our larger meeting where these issues are discussed in front of the county attorney. I would continue that to develop those relationships. I'd also rely on our victim witness staff. They do a tremendous job in reaching out to victims. We get their input. When we have these noon meetings, one of Tony's first questions is always, what does the victim think? And that's a central thought in our office, and I would continue that. So use victim witness to really reach out and build those relationships with the victims along with the prosecutors. In addition, you've also got to reach out to the other justice partners. You've got to be communicating with courts. You've got to be communicating with probation. You've got to be communicating with social services and all the other agencies. So it's about communication. It's about getting them on board.
Thank you. In this next question, we'll start with you, candidate Kish, and please at any time, if you need me to repeat a question for the second person, just please let me know. So the question is, for candidate Kish, how can the county attorney and office better protect abused and neglected children and vulnerable adults?
I think the answer to that begins with, again, more awareness of things that are going on. And in terms of the vulnerable adult issues, as I've already mentioned, I won't go back into it again, we've taken the forefront on elder abuse issues, getting awareness out there about these issues, getting people comfortable with reporting and making the criminal justice system and the process seem less scary and less foreign. So we're trying to reach out and do that. In terms of children, that comes down again to communication and getting a message out that, the criminal justice system, while it's complex and takes a while to navigate, isn't scary. And we're going to get the word out to parents and children and teachers. The other thing involving that with teachers is to communicate with school districts and have good relationships with those law enforcement officers, the liaison officers that are within the schools. There's been a push recently in some schools to eliminate those liaison officers, but that's the first step in building those relationships and protecting those kids when they know that a cop is their friend and they can go to their cop because they see him at school.
Thank you. And candidate Johnson?
Could you repeat the question, please?
How can the county attorney office better protect abused and neglected children and vulnerable adults?
This is why my criminal justice system, or criminal justice 2030 plan, sets forth a system by which we're going to increase relationships and actually create a liaison attorney to each of our law enforcement offices and each of our public high schools in the county so that we have a better finger on the pulse of things that are going on. But beyond that, to protect these children and these vulnerable adults, Mr. Kish's criminal division has to stop going easy on sex offenders. And I want to just refer to a few cases. There's the Phil Meemkin case, a Stearns County Sheriff's deputy who was charged with over 20 instances of sexually abusing 3 boys. Mr. Kish gave him probation. He later violated that probation and became a public safety risk, and another prosecutor had to send him to prison. There was a Rebecca Noonan case, soccer coach who sexually assaulted a 13-year-old boy, got a sweetheart plea deal and resulted in no conviction and no registration as a predatory offender. And then even this year, this June, under that criminal division, there's the Patrick Cook case where he sexually abused a relative boy for 8 years and got probation.
The next question, we'll start with you, candidate Johnson. What types of alternatives to incarceration are helpful in reducing recidivism among nonviolent offenders?
So one of the things that I'm an advocate of, and I think my opponent opposes, is not dealing with these cases like the lower level drug offenses by just ignoring them or decriminalizing them, but instead having a pre-charge diversion program. Pre-charge diversion programs are done in many counties, and they're outside of court. And what they include is having the offender, especially a drug offender, making an admission in an affidavit that they committed the offense, and we look at the person, and if they're not a huge public safety risk, we end up giving them the opportunity for diversion. That then means that they do a Rule 25 chemical health assessment, they get recommendations, they demonstrate sobriety, and if they do all of those things, then they don't even need to be involved in the criminal justice system, and that gets them off of that cycle. I think we can do that again. I think we can improve the system that we had, but ignoring those issues means that we're going to have to deal with bigger issues down the road.
Thank you. And candidate Kish?
Could you repeat it for me?
What types of alternatives to incarceration are helpful in reducing recidivism among nonviolent offenders?
Thank you. I want to go back to Mr. Meemkin's case just very briefly. Mr. Meemkin was convicted of a felony sex offense, was required to register as a sex offender, lost his job as a police officer, and ultimately went to prison. I don't know if that's an example of a case gone wrong. In terms of recidivism of nonviolent offenders and reducing that, Mr. Johnson's correct. I do oppose pre-charge diversion. I oppose it adamantly. We tried that many years ago. There was a 53% recidivism rate to pre-charge diversion, so our attorneys were spending a great deal of time on something that didn't work. So we took a look at it. At my urging, Tony Palumbo took a look at it and decided that based on the factors that were occurring, it was not worth continuing. It was also not worth continuing because we are in essence talking about felony level conduct. Felony level conduct should be charged. You can't on one hand say the county attorney's office isn't charging enough, but yet on the other hand say they shouldn't charge these. So we oppose pre-charge diversion. It didn't work, and it's felony level conduct that should be charged.
Thank you. And next question, we'll begin with you, candidate Kish. What improvements will you make to the child support enforcement responsibilities of the county attorney's office?
Could you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Yep. What improvements will you make to the child support enforcement responsibilities of the county attorney's office?
I think the first thing is to recognize where child support has been. It's been a tumultuous last couple of years because of the pandemic. They've had to rotate from typically all in-person court to a system where it's now almost all completely remote. So it's been difficult for them. They've had to retool their operations. So we'll continue to make improvements in terms of the efficacy of having those hearings on a remote basis. Because we have trouble then getting these people into court and getting them to actually abide by their child support orders when it's remote. So we have to make improvements in that respect. We also have to make improvements with respect to communicating with the child support officers, because now that has been largely reduced to a remote communication. So both communication in terms of the court hearings themselves and communication with the child support officer, I think, is vital.
Thank you. Candidate Johnson?
Thank you. And, child support is a difficult issue. I agree that the remote hearings have been difficult. I think having regular check-ins and scheduling regular check-ins with the court so that you have a review hearing periodically to see where compliance has been on child support is absolutely necessary in those cases. I would compare it to child protection cases, which I handle regularly, where we have intermediate dispositional review hearings, or we call them dispo review hearings. And I think getting those people back in before the court, having them explain what's going on and why they haven't been paying their child support is absolutely vital to enforcing the child support obligations. And then following up with the child support officers and making sure they have all the tools that they need and the court orders that they need to enforce child support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question begins with you, candidate Johnson. How would your office support police departments?
I'm glad you asked the question, and in particular, I'm going to emphasize this. Last month, my opponent and I met with the Sheriff's Deputies Patrol Division, and in a rather remarkable event in Anoka County, that patrol division, Local 222, endorsed me over my opponent. That's the first time they've ever endorsed in a county attorney's race, and it's the first time that they've ever done so unanimously as well. So the county attorney's office needs a change in leadership to move forward in the eyes of law enforcement. I shared with them my vision for that office, and they wrote back in their endorsement letter, "It was apparent that you understand the importance of enforcing Minnesota state statutes and working directly with your law enforcement partners to combat the rising crime issues within the county. We feel your knowledge, experience, and history of prosecuting numerous different criminal matters will be beneficial to you and look forward to look to continue to build the Anoka County Attorney's Office strong reputation."
Thank you.
Thank you.
And candidate Kish?
I'll specifically answer the question, how would your office support police departments? We've done that in terms of a protocol that I created within the last year called the Intensive Enforcement Protocol. Recently, due to a number of events societally, two things have exploded. That would be assaults on police officers and fleeing cases. So I created an intensive enforcement protocol which requires a higher level of review where the supervisor has to get involved in the case, and we have to have multiple conversations with law enforcement before making any decisions or taking any action on cases involving officers who are involved in assaults against them or people who flee from them now, which is unfortunately a very regular occurrence. The second thing that's important that I know that our office would do in terms of supporting police departments is engaging in situations where officers are accused of misconduct. I have an extensive experience in handling these kinds of cases where officers have been accused of misconduct. I've handled over 20 cases for 7 different counties across the state. I am trusted by law enforcement, both in this county and in others, to address those cases fairly and to do so with something that's forgotten in other places. And that's the presumption of innocence that should apply to officers as well as other defendants.
Thank you. And this next question begins with you, candidate Kish. What are your viewpoints on no-knock warrants?
My viewpoints on no-knock warrants are fairly straightforward and simple. They're a vital law enforcement tool. Anyone who opposes no-knock warrants in their entirety will eventually have law enforcement blood on their hands. You cannot tell law enforcement they cannot use a no-knock warrant when the person behind the door is waiting with with a loaded gun, which is potentially, as we see increasing now more, a fully automatic weapon. So they are absolutely essential, and any full opposition to them, again, will result in law enforcement deaths. What we need to do, as we do in our office already, we're one of the few county attorney's offices in the state, we review, a seasoned prosecutor reviews any application for any warrant, much less no-knocks. So my viewpoint, again, they are necessary, we have to use them, and they need to be reviewed by a seasoned prosecutor as we've been doing.
Thank you. And candidate Johnson,
Could you just read the question again, please?
what is your viewpoints on no-knock warrants?
I would agree that no-knock warrants are a vital tool for law enforcement in extreme cases. I would disagree, though, that they need to be used frequently. I do think the review process is absolutely vital and necessary. But like I said, as a Coon Rapids City Council member, I hear about these no-knock warrants that go bad, including one that went bad in my own ward in Coon Rapids, where a no-knock warrant was done after county attorney office review of that no-knock warrant, and it was done on the wrong residence. Now, some of that is based on the information that came in the warrant that came from the city of Minneapolis, and then Anoka County relied on it, and others in law enforcement relied on it. But the reality is that the vetting process in the Anoka County Attorney's Office was not sufficient enough to catch, had they just looked at the court records, that person was on probation in a different county, and they would have been able to contact the probation officer there and find out that there was another address for them. So we need to bolster and make more robust the process in the Anoka County Attorney's Office for the review.
Thank you. And this next question starts with you, candidate Johnson. What short-term and long-term changes would you like to implement in the county attorney's office?
Short-term changes are to basically start the process immediately by ending the fifth-degree drug offense policy that Mr. Kish has in place that ignores certain drug crimes. It actually says that if you're an officer and you find somebody and they've got a certain amount of drugs on them, we're not going to charge it. We still want you to make the arrest. Still want you to seize the contraband. We still want you to write the police report. We still want you to put them in jail, and we'll approve a 48-hour affidavit, but we're not going to ultimately charge it. And those policies need to come to an end in favor of pre-charge diversion and other programs like that. Long-term programs, take a look at my criminal justice 2030 plan that's on the website, bradforanoka.com. You will see on that website that I've got plans for a reentry court. I've got plans for improving the fleeing statute so we can better support our police officers. I've got plans for dealing with carjacking that are superior to what they have now and to building relationships with law enforcement.
Thank you. And candidate Kish?
Could you repeat for me?
What short-term and long-term changes would you like to implement in the county attorney's office?
First of all, going back to the fifth-degree drug offenses, that policy was put in place by the county attorney, Tony Palumbo. It was not my policy. And it's not true that we don't charge fifth-degree drug offenses. In fact, in 2021 alone, we charged over 400 of those offenses. I don't think you can simultaneously say, let's do pre-charge diversion, but yet the county attorney's office isn't charging these cases. That's not accurate. So we would continue with some degree of that policy. We would also look at remodeling that policy as it relates to the spike in fentanyl. That has to be addressed. That's a significant public safety concern. In terms of other short-term changes, we would also need to look at the possibility of expanding our criminal division staff. There's recruitment and retention issues. That's true. We saw that fire. We put it out. But the next issue to step into is potentially increasing our staff. And in terms of another long-term issue that we would need to do is to look at quality of life issues for not only our prosecutors but our law enforcement to make their jobs something they can do more long-term in terms of their mental health. So we really need to pay attention to prosecutors and law enforcement's long-term mental health.
All right, thank you. And that ends the question and answer portion of the evening. So now we'll move on to the closing statements. And each candidate will have 1 minute to give a closing statement. And again, this will be in the reverse alphabetical order. So we'll start with candidate Kish. So if you'd like to go ahead with your closing statement.
Thank you. I'm a prosecutor, not a politician, so selling myself doesn't come easy. But you don't have to take my word for it. We recently received a very compelling letter from a former victim. I was in high school when a man sexually assaulted my grandfather, who was in his 80s, blind and battling cancer. I saw how uplifted my grandfather felt after working with Wade. Wade inspired my grandfather to seek justice for what happened to him and to hold his assailant accountable. But he also inspired my grandfather to do it for the betterment of the community. After our family worked with Wade, I gained a fire in my gut that has led me to a law degree, a prosecution job in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm now 28 years old, I have my dream job, and I proudly can say that I now prosecute sex crimes just like Wade. Wade inspired my grandfather. His work on that case alone is commendable. But the thing I will never be able to thank Wade enough for was showing me that victims matter, justice matters, and community matters. Lindsay Porter. I really can't say it any better myself. I've dedicated 19 years in this county, the whole county, to victims, to justice. I'd love the opportunity as your county attorney to inspire and lead our staff to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Johnson.
Thank you. Anoka County is a wonderful place to live, but the county attorney's office needs to evolve and improve to meet the times. I read to you earlier from a sheriff's patrol deputy's endorsement letter of me, and it's important that you understand that they ended that letter by saying, "We believe that your fundamental beliefs and ideas will help to strengthen the relationships between the Anoka County Attorney's Office and the Anoka County Sheriff's Office." It's my sign that's at the end of the driveway of Sheriff Jim Stewart. He supports me in this role, and that's reflected by my sign being at the end of his driveway. The reality is that the county attorney's office needs new leadership. The same is true with other parts of the county. You know, we need a county attorney's office that has the ability to tap its relationships, and that's why I've been endorsed by the Minneapolis Building Trades and Construction Council, mayors around the county, including Jerry Cook and Sherry Bukala, city council members, and the like. I ask for your support and your vote. We all do better when we all work together. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for running for Anoka County Attorney and for being a part of the democratic process, for being here this evening and being willing to serve your communities. A special thank you to NorthMetro for their recording, the City of Blaine for use of the facilities, and to Mediation and Restorative Services for co-sponsoring this Meet the Candidates Forum. Thank you also, viewers, for your interest in becoming informed voters. We hope that this forum has helped you to make an informed decision. As we move through the election season, link to all of our local election forums at LWVABCMN.org. And if you have questions left unanswered by the forum, please contact the candidates directly. To register to vote or update your registration, go online to mnvotes.gov. You can also register when you go to vote. There are a lot of races on this year's ballot, and redistricting has taken place, so if you're unsure where to vote or if you want to preview what will be on your ballot, you can also go to mnvotes.gov. And when you vote, you participate in our democracy, you make it stronger, and you make it yours. Vote on or before November 8th. Thank you.